So we have flagged issues. What next? Well, firstly, because we're trying to automate as much of this as possible, we need to give the AI another chance to review itself, to give the automation a chance to catch or fix the error that it's found before flagging again. But what if it fails again? Well, then we need to surface this issue for a person to review. But we need to think about this carefully. How can we make it as easy as possible for the person to do their review, to have enough context? Are there stages of escalation? Can we even suggest ideas or content? In other words, how can we get the AI to assist the human to review what needs reviewing? We have another video in this course which is about prompting for agents, which is all about designing instructions for general purpose AI steps. But it's worth going into prompting again here in automating review, because when you're designing agents, you're not just adding a bunch of action steps with questions in them for AI. Really, much of workflow design is all about systematically checking, rechecking, validating data. And you can do a ton of work in prompts to improve the way that AI checks its own work. One example of this kind of prompting is vendor matching. In this case, we're not asking the AI to just pick a name. We're giving it a method for how to decide. The prompt tells it where to look, like the top of the document, or how to compare names, like exact match or partial match, and when to back off and say no match. This turns what could be a potentially vague task into a very consistent, structured decision for the AI, which is exactly what we want when we're automating review. What makes this prompt especially effective is that it quietly embeds techniques used in real matching systems. It hints at string similarity scoring, uses positional bias by checking headers first, and even includes fallback logic if confidence is low. And these aren't just tricks. They kind of make the AI perform like a proper matching engine. And that's the power of a good prompt. It doesn't just ask for an answer. It defines the framework of how to answer. In Glide, different AI actions like generate text, text to choice, and text to JSON all run on language models, but they're structured differently. Each one applies distinct constraints and output formats. That means that when you ask the same question through multiple actions, you're not just repeating yourself, you're testing the model under different constraints. For example, text to JSON is restricted to structured output and is great at field level validation, while text to choice narrows down responses to a fixed list. By cross-checking the same input through different AI actions, you're not only applying different structural constraints, you're also shaping the model's prediction path through different prompt formats. Each action kind of elicits a different pattern matching behavior from the underlying model. And when they disagree, this becomes a really useful signal for identifying when something needs review. There's a great example of this in the invoice manager. Firstly, we try to find a vendor and return it as JSON, and we pass in the list of all vendors to that prompt. We then try to validate that vendor, or rather do another check for that vendor by passing in the text to choice step and give it a very different prompt, which is based around pattern matching. So sometimes the AI is going to get it wrong on the first try, or just isn't going to be confident enough. And in these cases, instead of immediately flagging for a human, you can rerun the step with adjusted context. And this is what we mean by rechecking. You might add a new hint to the AI, you might highlight an earlier failure and give that information, or you just might slightly alter the wording of the prompt. Even really small changes to a prompt can shift the model's output, because large language models are really sensitive to phrasing and context. For example, if the first JSON step returns a blank or uncertain result, we might pass in the same text again, but add a line saying, this was attempted earlier but had the following error. And this helps the model reason differently the second time, and often gives you a better result before resorting to a human. So to wrap up, here's a real example from Evan showing how this plays out in production. In this clip, he walks through a live workflow handling email-based orders and explains when to flag, how to not overthink automation, and how to structure workflows around human review.
So we're now inside of the email order receiver. What this does is it gets emails from customers and checks to see first whether or not that email is from a customer. So we pull out the all customer list and then checks to see if the email that this is from is in this list. Then the next thing that we do is text to JSON. And you'll see this a lot within my workflows and workflows within the community, text to JSON, because we can take something very unstructured, like an email, like a PDF document, and structure it now in a way that is readable, loopable by workflows. So, structure email data. We have a bunch of extra processing up here of just like how to think about what it's doing, the output that we're expecting, email different variations, some error handling, skip invalid parts, log unparsable quantities, set quantity to 1 if it's unclear. So if somebody just says, I need this part number, assume that it's 1. Instructions for AI to generate log entries. So this logging section is the one that we're talking about here, this flagging section. So the end output has this log section, which has a flag, a reason code, and a message. So this goes a little bit further into detail. And what I did was flagging is true when the reason code is no parts, invalid email, or parse error. And I give a little description of what each of these are. If there's no parts, no valid parts found in the email, return no parts. If there's no email to look at, invalid email. When email structure is unparsable, parse error. So those are the 3 main things to flag on. Then we have what I like to call information flags. So these are all things that are under flags. So info just means, hey, give me your thoughts on the extraction process. Success means clean extraction with no modifications. Quantity assumed would be that the a part didn't have a quantity associated with it, so we're assuming a part of the quantity. Partial extract means that we only got some of the parts and some of the parts had an issue. And then multi-match, multiple possible matches found for different parts. So these are a few different states. And actually looking at this, I'd probably actually move this up to error. I think that would be something that we would end up finding in a QA process for this simulated business, is that there are only parts of orders pushed, and the reason would be that was in the wrong section. So we want to flag and then select a reason code. And then the message part of this. So we're talking about flagging true, a reason code, and then a message. Successfully extracted 2 of the 3 items. So give me more details on this reason message so that I can then read it. So if we go back to our home screen here, we have message surfaced for the user from the AI. So attempt to define GOL parts, none found in email. So if we come in here, now we get the reason code and the message as part of what we're surfacing to the user on why this happened. So, and if we look here, we have the original email. We're only saying high capacity SSD 1 terabyte, 17 units. Well, this isn't a part number, it's a part name, but it's not a part number. So we're going to flag that for units. Flag this for human review, to where the human can then come in and find a high capacity SSD and add this here. And you may be wondering, well, maybe we could just match the parts. And this is where you really need to think about whether or not it's worth the errors that could happen in the workflow and the time that it would take to work through and test that workflow. So, for example, we have the luxury in this demo environment that the emails are all using the full name. But imagine in the real world, somebody emailing an order in, and they just say, I want an SSD, 17 units. But in our database, we have 15 different SSDs. You don't want the AI trying to decide which one of those the user wanted just based on name. So I would recommend for this simulated company that we only look for part numbers. We tell people if they're going to place an order by email, they need to include part number and quantity to make sure that that's placed efficiently. So within here, if we were to have this secondary structure to look for names instead, we would then come down here to orders flagged, where the extraction had a flag. And then we try, and I would then create a condition that looks for each reason code and then has processing based on each reason code. This would get, we had 9 or 10 different reason code conditions. We then would end up having a very long workflow with a bunch of edge cases because you've created now a bunch of potential issues within each new attempt to fix an issue. Whereas if we had an issue on this first one, let's just get it to a human, especially with something like orders. People place an order, they want their order to be placed, picked, and shipped. So if there's an issue trying to do that faster with AI, let's just get it to the ops team and let them handle it right away.
So the review process isn't just about resolving individual errors, it's about how your system learns. Sometimes that learning comes from loose, anecdotal feedback, like users asking, why did I have to check this? Or flagging edge cases in a conversation with you. And this can help you improve the way that your agent handles work. But over time, you can make this feedback loop more structured. For example, you might want to start logging every time a manual review happens, like what was flagged, what the user changed or added, and then use that data, maybe not now, but later, to refine your prompts and add new conditions or just tighten your logic. Even without full automation, you're always going to be evolving the system, and then review becomes not just a source of slight iteration, but actually a way that you iterate your agents.